What if I told you that the Roman Empire, the greatest civilization the world had ever seen, didn't fall because of invading armies? They were invaded, that part is true, but the invasions didn't cause the collapse. They just finished off something that was already dying from the inside. Rome fell because of a chain of decisions, political, economic, military, that each made perfect sense at the time, and together they destroyed everything. And here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. Almost every single one of those decisions is being made somewhere in the world right now. I'm Bitsy. This is Useful Bits TV. Let's talk about why Rome really fell. Before we talk about the fall, you need to understand what was actually falling. At its peak, around 117 AD under Emperor Trajan, the Roman Empire covered about 5 million square kilometers. That's roughly the size of the entire continental United States. It had a population of somewhere between 50 and 90 million people, at a time when the entire world population was maybe 200 million. Rome was home to roughly 1 in 3 people on Earth. It had running water, sewage systems, roads that stretched over 400,000 kilometers, a legal system, a professional military, a postal service. For its time, Rome wasn't just advanced, it was centuries ahead of everything around it. So when something this size collapses, it doesn't happen overnight, it happens in stages, and each stage has a very specific cause. There are 5 of them, and they all connect. The first and most important cause: political instability. Here's a number that tells the whole story. Between 27 BC and 235 AD, about 260 years, Rome had 26 emperors. That's roughly one new emperor every 10 years. That sounds fast, but what came next was catastrophic. Between 235 AD and 284 AD, just 49 years, Rome had at least 26 emperors again. Some historians say the real number was closer to 50. That's a new emperor roughly every year, sometimes faster. In 238 AD alone, one single year, Rome had 6 different emperors. 6 in one year. This period is called the crisis of the 3rd century. Historians also call it the military anarchy, because that's what it was. Armies in different parts of the empire started proclaiming their own generals as emperor. The general would march on Rome, kill the current emperor, take the throne, then get killed by the next general 6 months later. And here's the real problem. While all of this was happening, nobody was actually running the empire. The borders weren't being maintained. The economy wasn't being managed. Laws weren't being enforced. A country where the leader changes every year cannot plan for the future, and Rome stopped planning for the future. Now here's where it gets really interesting, because the second cause, the economic collapse, is directly connected to the political one. Every time a new emperor took power, he needed to pay his army. That was literally how you kept power. Keep the soldiers loyal, keep your head. But the empire was already stretched thin financially. Wars were expensive, infrastructure was expensive, feeding 50 to 90 million people was expensive. So the emperors did something that seemed smart in the short term and was catastrophic in the long term. They debased the currency. Here's what that means. Rome's primary coin was the denarius, a silver coin. Under Augustus around 27 BC, the denarius was about 95% pure silver. Over time, emperors quietly reduced the silver content and replaced it with cheaper metals, more coins, less value. Under Nero around 65 AD, it dropped to about 90% silver, still okay. Under Marcus Aurelius around 180 AD, down to 75%. By 211 AD, 50%. And by 268 AD, the denarius had just 0.5% silver, half a percent. The coin was essentially worthless metal painted to look like silver. What happens when your money becomes worthless? Prices explode. During the 3rd century, prices across the Roman Empire rose by nearly 1,000%. That is hyperinflation, the same kind that has destroyed economies in the modern world. Merchants stopped trusting coins, trade broke down, soldiers were being paid in currency that bought almost nothing. Tax collection collapsed because nobody wanted the coins. The entire financial engine of the Roman Empire, The system that funded the roads, the army, the food supply, seized up. Third cause, and this one is subtle but deadly, the military changed. At Rome's peak, the Roman legions were made up of Roman citizens, men who were fighting for their home, their families, their civilization. They were professional, disciplined, and deeply loyal to Rome itself. But as the empire expanded and the crisis of the 3rd century drained the population, Rome started running out of Roman soldiers. So they did the logical thing. They hired outsiders, Germanic warriors, Goths, Vandals, tribes from the very borders Rome was supposed to be defending. These soldiers were paid mercenaries, good fighters, but their loyalty was to their paycheck, not to Rome. And here's the problem. As the currency collapsed, the paychecks became worthless. By the late empire, large portions of the Roman military were Germanic fighters who had no particular reason to defend Rome if a better offer came along. And eventually, a better offer came along. In 410 AD, a Gothic king named Alaric sacked the city of Rome. His forces had previously served in the Roman military. They knew the city, they knew the defenses, they walked right in. The Eternal City, the city that had never been sacked in 800 years, fell to an army that Rome itself had trained. Fourth cause, and this one nobody talks about enough. Rome simply got too big to manage. Think about this practically. At its peak, the Roman Empire stretched from Scotland in the north to Egypt in the south, from Portugal in the west to modern-day Iraq in the east. Without modern communication, without phones, without computers, without cars, a message from Rome to the eastern frontier took weeks. An army mobilizing to respond to an attack took months. By the time the response arrived, the damage was done. Emperor Diocletian recognized this in 285 AD. His solution was actually brilliant. He split the empire in two, a Western empire centered in Rome and an Eastern empire centered in Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. The Eastern Empire, which became the Byzantine Empire, survived for another 1,000 years. It didn't fall until 1453 AD. The Western Empire collapsed in 476 AD. Same civilization, same laws, same heritage. One half survived, one half didn't. The difference? The eastern half had better geographic defenses, a stronger economy, and was smaller and easier to manage. Size was a weapon when Rome was conquering. Size became a liability when Rome was defending. So by 476 AD, when a Germanic leader named Odoacer walked into Rome and deposed the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, what actually happened? Not a dramatic final battle, not a civilization destroyed in a blaze of fire. Romulus Augustulus was a teenager. He had been emperor for less than a year. Odoacer sent him into comfortable exile and simply declared himself king of Italy. No one really fought back, because there was almost nothing left to fight for. The currency was worthless. The army was a shadow of itself. The political system had been in chaos for 200 years. The infrastructure was crumbling. The population had been devastated by plague and famine. The fall of Rome wasn't a moment. It was the final page of a very long story that had been written over 200 years. Odoacer didn't destroy Rome. Rome had already destroyed itself. Now, here's why this matters today. And I want to be clear, I'm not pointing fingers at any specific country. Historians point to these patterns across multiple modern civilizations. This is about the patterns, not the politics. Pattern 1, currency debasement. Every major economy in the modern world has printed money to solve short-term problems and created long-term inflation. Rome didn't invent this problem, but Rome shows us where it ends. Pattern 2, political instability. When leadership changes too fast, long-term planning becomes impossible. Sound familiar? Pattern 3, outsourcing your military. When the people defending a civilization don't feel connected to what they're defending, loyalty becomes transactional. Pattern 4, too big to manage. The more complex a system gets, the more fragile it becomes. The more difficult it is to respond to problems quickly. Rome didn't fall because it was weak. Rome fell because it was so successful, so large, so complex, that when the cracks started appearing, nobody could fix them fast enough. That's not just a Roman problem. 476 AD, a teenager emperor, a Germanic king who didn't even want the throne, and 800 years of Roman civilization quietly ended. Not with a bang, with a paperwork transfer. The lesson isn't that Rome was doomed. The lesson is that no civilization is too big, too powerful, or too advanced to fail if it ignores the warning signs long enough. If you want to understand the world today, study history, because it's all happened before. Hit subscribe, because next time we're going deep on the Mongols, the most misunderstood conquerors in history. You think they were just violent destroyers? Wait until you hear what they actually built. I'm Bitsy. This is Useful Bits TV. See you next one.